prefers to play his favorite sport, and the temperature is low.
Hello, friends. It's Jim McCarthy with American Vapor Manufacturers, along with Joe Gitchell, back for another episode of Shaping Vaping, our podcast on nicotine and THR policy. And that intro music, Joe, as I'm sure you know, comes from a wonderful musical ensemble called the Yale Whiffenpoofs. And I played that.
Porter magic right there.
Exactly. I don't know. We'll put the lyrics in the chat. They were singing about the Kinsey report in one of those lyrics. I thought you'd find that amusing. And of course, Joe, as a storied and luminary alum of that fine institution in Connecticut, is going to be leading our show today. Normally, I'm the one presenting the slides.
Well, at least partial. At least partial.
Leading. How about a kickoff? You'll be starting quarterback. Put it that way.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jim. And but I will digress. So since I was at Yale when we recorded taped last week's show, and that occasioned the opportunity, and I'm calling it my humility tour, because I did take pictures with two classmates, and the first one was with Jeff Brock, who is an endowed professor of math and the dean of the Yale School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. So, like in my LinkedIn post, here's all the things about him. And, you know, I did complete multivariable calculus before realizing that history would be a better major than applied math. And then I took a picture with a dear friend, Josiah Brown, who is such a cool, thoughtful guy, and he runs for the state of Connecticut this court-appointed special advocates program to help children who are in the foster and other sort of court-overseen programs to have volunteers with training and ability to help look out for these children's interests. And it's and I have a collection of ray gun T-shirts. It's what's wrong? It's not a comparison; it's a contrast. So, speaking of my major in history, I thought for this section I was going to do a little retrospective, and I was going to pull from three articles. We'll put the full links in the chat. Right. One actually science article, and then two op-ed more pieces. So the first, if you want to pull up the first one, Jim's helping me out. I've done some screenshotting, but this piece.
Which one is it? The policymakers?
Well, it's the one that has one in the file name. Okay. Thank you. And then they're numbered in that way.
All right.
So this was when the Washington Post had a health section. This was the Above the Fold feature in June of 1998.
Wow.
By Sandra Boodman, who I think just recently retired.
Yeah.
And I just pulled some quotes from it, and we'll just ask people how timeless some of these points are. That there's a view that nicotine, when it is not smoked, is a relatively benign and possibly even beneficial. This dramatic change in attitude has ushered in new and sometimes controversial approaches. So if you want to pull up number 2, and we're going to see some similar name. Well, folks may not know Dr. Sachs, but he is a very accomplished clinician and researcher. But this is his version of the Mike Russell quote, and highlighting that most people, whether they're patients or physicians, don't understand the difference between dependence on nicotine and dependence on tobacco. And while it is dependence on nicotine that drives people to smoke, it's the dependence on tobacco that actually shortens people's lives. And then so that theme was resonant and important 28 years ago. Let's go to the next one, Jim. And here, even though they didn't spell his name correctly, as he's a Neal Benowitz, Neil Benowitz, this is probably not quite word for word what he presented at the Nicotine Summit in early May, but it's pretty close.
And this was in 93, you said?
98.
98, all right.
and here focused on the nicotine medications, but a very similar take on relative risk and the absolute risk as well.
Well, I'll ask you a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
One of my great professors at the University of Notre Dame, where students go if they don't require a fallback like Yale, used to ask me when I would present in class. I would present, and he would say, "And therefore." And so that's my question to you, Joe. And therefore,
well, but then the last one is a quote from a target of your frequent criticism. If you pull up number 4, as Mitch Zeller was serving at the FDA at the time, and he was highlighting the uncertainty that came along with if you just reduce smoking as opposed to completely stopping, is that going to be associated with health benefits? So just to highlight the timelessness of that question. So I'm going to jump. So again, I'll include the link to this 1998 article. The next is a shorter piece, Jim, just an op-ed from a number of expert commentators pivoting on press accounts of then President Obama and whether he was still smoking or what was with his annual physical, what was his nicotine use. And what this short op-ed was noting is that the president was able to use nicotine gum in a way that is encouraged and allowed in the UK, but is not in the USA under our FDA. And
wait, how so? I thought nicotine gum was available at every drugstore.
It is available, but the labeling, while it did improve somewhat in 2013, still requires people, is more constrained. The uses available in the UK are much broader. You can use nicotine gum in times and places when you can't smoke, even if you're not specifically intending to stop smoking. You can use it to cut down your smoking as opposed to quit completely. And you can use it long term, and you're encouraged to do so to stay off cigarettes.
So it's a little more liberal in that classical sense.
Indeed. And that's actually in much of the rest of the high and middle income world. One of my lines from the time was you could use nicotine gum more liberally in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia than you can in the US of A. That's still
the case in your estimation.
Is certainly in terms of the formal language on the labeling, yes. So there's definitely room for improvement on the medicine side, though it did get better in the wake of the Tobacco Control Act and some provisions that required updates, or at least the drug center at FDA to re-examine how they were labeling and regulating these products. So that's another point.
It feels like we should kick some of these around. We're giving our listeners a lot to chew on. Should we kick these around a little bit?
Well, I'm sensitive to time. This is my first time behind the wheel.
We're here to learn.
Okay, so yeah, go. I'm certainly open to discourse.
Well, let's just put a pause there, because I've got a lot of thoughts about these, if I may. I mean, for one thing, on the Washington Post, the first clip that you put up, I can't help but notice just sort of how could I put this gently, the historical schizophrenia at that newspaper. I mean, which is it? Nicotine's a possibly beneficial drug when it's not smoked, or it's going to give you cancer, erectile dysfunction, and turn your kid into a possessed demon, or the FDA ought to crack down harder, faster, quicker, or FDA's enforcement discretion is a good thing, or, I mean, when can readers expect their head to stop spinning around?
Well, at some level, that's a fair and accurate representation of the state of the debate on this. There's certainly those range of viewpoints available out in the marketplace of ideas.
Well, but the newspaper's job is to sort through those varying viewpoints and help shoot straight with the reader about what to rely on, not to simply sock puppet them all and come across looking like a deranged lunatic.
Well, I think that there is a great opportunity for more alignment with credible, thoughtful sources on this. That's unfortunately not typically where they always seem to go.
You know, it never ceases to amaze me. These people at the Washington Post and journalism writ large, these people can't go 72 hours without whining to the church rafters about how they're misunderstood and people are losing trust in them, and there's so much unreliable information in the worldwide internet. And if it weren't for us journalists sorting through that to, you know, shoot straight and tell you what the capital T truth is, you peasants would be lost. And yet we're looking at examples here of how over the last 20 years, these people can't even decide how they themselves regard this preeminent public health issue. I mean, I'll ask it another way. If you know, given the absolute whipsaw 180-degree turning donuts on the front yard with the car, in the Washington Post's, you know, reporting and presentation on nicotine, why should any reader rely on them on this subject?
Well, the fact that conclusions or recommendations change is not necessarily the mark of a failed knowledge curation process, right? It could be that understanding has actually changed. I think what we struggle with in this particular space is that the underlying scientific arena has become so divided, so polarized, and so moralized, and it has this deep and engaging backdrop of historical bad behavior that was that really infects the way people perceive the status quo. So I think there's a lot that goes into this. I think but I will agree with your broad point that the health and science remaining reporters at the Post to be like, how close to best available evidence are we hewing on this? It would be amazing if they were prepared to do that, and not
well,
just.
They had an editorial. I'll remind you.
Back in March,
right, 3 months ago, sticking up in a full-throated voice for tobacco harm reduction and urging the FDA to go further on, you know, loosening its restrictions and sobering up on the topic. And I applauded it at the time. I thought it was a great thing. And then 2 weeks ago, they featured a column on that same page by Dr. Leana Wen, trafficking all of the worst, most tendentious, debunked claims about vaping. And, you know, yes, I accept that there's a variety of voices out there and people feel that it's polarized, as you put it. But, you know, if you're an ordinary reader in Montgomery County, Maryland, and you're reading the Washington Post looking for reliable information on nicotine, you're going to quickly conclude this isn't the place to find it, because these people can't get their head around the topic. You'd learn more about it from the bar at the Chevy Chase Lounge. I should think.
Shout out to the Parthenon and the Chevy Chase Lounge, all 100% right there.
It's one of our for our listeners. That's one of our me and Joe's favorite bars.
It's a wonderful neighborhood,
high net worth zip code, Montgomery County.
So no, but fair. So other comments.
On the one thing that struck me on the Zeller quote. Was what he's talking about here. Again, this is 1998, you say? Yeah.
98.
Yeah. I mean, he's talking about people that reduce their consumption of cigarettes from, say, a pack and a half to merely a pack, and whether that, you know, is an improvement or step in the right direction for them. I don't know if that question's been resolved. I expect there's probably, you know, pretty vociferous debate about it.
But well, I would say based on like CTP Zeller's own words in the last several years, I think it actually has moved on quite a bit, with FDA adopting the position that the best outcome is switching, stopping completely, switching completely to the non-combustible product, but substantial reductions of at least 50% of cigarette smoked are associated with improvements in health. And they did epi work to come to those bases. And that is part of their regulatory decision making, is that you get partial credit, if you will, for substantial reduction. So I would say that's a case where thinking has evolved.
Yeah. I mean, I guess what bothers me about it is just that, how could I put this? There's always going to be some way to turn the regulatory Rubik's Cube and, grapple with these different slices of the overall issue about nicotine use. And my problem is that a person like Mitch Zeller, for all these many years, has had his hands in some grip, hard or soft, on the steering wheel of those policies. And he doesn't give a good goddamn what I think, or what Nick Green thinks, or what the 10 million Americans who rely on vaping products think, or what any voter thinks. And it really bothers me that a person like that, whose ineptitude and hardline attitude toward nicotine has had such a predominant influence on this issue, much to the detriment of this country. And to sort of see him, low 20 years ago, pontificating about, oh, well, here's what I think, and this would, we do it this way, and switch the spark plugs, change out the oil, well, then the car might accelerate quicker. Who cares? Like this guy's done, I don't know. It just really...
no, I appreciate your commitment to your belief around this, and it is something where you're not going to be able to persuade me to adopt that thinking, because I just know too much and know Mitch too well.
Let's ask again.
Hold on, wait. I'll let you spout your blah blah. Right, please. Often wrong, never in doubt. Whatever.
Please.
The point is, for my own part, I think the net contribution of Mitch Zeller to this space is overwhelmingly positive. Is it what it could be? That's a different question. But if we're going to regulate this market, which Congress has said we're going to do, I think he had a clear goal in mind, and he did the best that he could to try to advance that. So I disagree with you that I just disagree with you. So.
Well, it was 2 weeks ago, I'll remind you, Joe, that we grappled with the question of whether we could go back in time to when FDA
deeming and
vaping, when this gentleman was the head of Center for Tobacco Products, and you and I both agreed, no, we would not allow them to do it. And you know why? Because it was a disaster.
Well, we don't need to go through all of that again. But
it touches on the question of whether Mitch Zeller's done a good job or not, doesn't it?
Well, it's a lot of things. I mean, how committed I am to the whole make new mistakes thing. And I think we are entering a window where at least we could be trying to make some new and different mistakes that aren't the same as they were before. But
well, it was a mistake to give him control over vaping products.
I mean, that was my position based on my hindsight view, that if I had to do it all over, yeah.
That's what I'm saying too. That's the point I'm making too. I mean, I'm using stronger adjectives, but because I think the stakes are so high. But it just, it bothers me that back then and all throughout, and when that deeming occurred, and even up till last week, this gentleman is still being quoted and regarded as some kind of respected voice, and that ain't the way most Americans see it. I know you like him, and I regard him as a colleague, and he's been, as I point out, at the steering wheel of this issue for many, many years, but. I would really, again, urge you, as I have before, to look at what ordinary vapors, ordinary Americans who are affected by these policies, whose lives are being impacted, nicotine users, consumers. Look at the sidebar on Nick Green's live stream. If you'd like an opinion about how most ordinary Americans regard Mitch Zeller, and those people are relevant, Joe. These aren't just flyover state widgets in some diorama. These are real human beings whose lives are at stake, and who are being affected by what this guy has been doing. And I am here to tell you, if you think my adjectives are a little
no, that's fair. That's fair. But
the opinion of most Americans of that guy who know about what he's done is rock bottom.
Well, then, let me continue my journey on getting less wrong. Then,
sorry, yes, yeah, and cross-examine me. Don't let me grab the steering wheel of our show today.
No,
you're the quarterback.
Well, people may notice I'm relying on Jim, so I'm like training wheels. I'm training wheels. So let's training wheels. So we interlude up to 2010 with the invocation of President Obama's nicotine consumption and the implications, and what does it mean from learning from outside the U.S. Is that any way to inform us?
I find it striking. Yeah, I mean, if I'm sorry to interject, but I find it striking here that the U.S. regulators and U.S. tobacco control has been so authoritarian on nicotine gum, of all things. I mean, I focus so much on the vape space and pouches to an extent, but I mean, that is just shocking to me. That's just shocking to me, and I think it betrays everything about their attitude.
Well, let me try to round out the understanding in that it's a very asymmetrical risk portfolio for medical reviewers at FDA. They don't get credit for a blockbuster that improves millions of people's lives. You can't name the medical reviewer who approved the Wegovy or Zepbound or any of that sort of stuff, but they were very involved with getting those medicines to the market. But if something goes wrong with the medicine, then the accountability is very clear. So their risk tolerance is typically very low. And I think there's an important debate about how to calibrate that best for welfare broadly. But I think we need to understand and start from there. It was a bold move in 1996 for FDA to approve nicotine gum without a prescription, to have it be available in 50,000 drugstores. That was seen as a pretty bold step.
Seen by who?
By many observers in the medical health community.
May I suggest how consumers regarded it? The actual Americans whose lives are being affected by these policies, they thought it was a no-brainer.
Well, I mean, that is an important input, and I think that is one area. If there was more innovation, better products available as medicines, I think that could still be an important part of reducing smoking.
I mean, what you said a moment ago, Joe, about the perverse incentives that FDA regulators face might as well have come out of the clips that I've put up on this show previously from the great Professor Milton Friedman, who points it out, not to say, oh, like, here's a look behind the curtain, let them continue with the play, but rather to say those perverse incentives defeat the very purpose of the agency.
Well,
you're pointing out as if to say, well, they got a tough job.
Well, it is a challenging balancing act. I think the strongest point of your Friedman argument, and where the unregulated nature of vapes, the Sains and Pesco paper on mortality stuff, we don't have that many examples of actual examples to demonstrate your argument. We have a lot of counter examples from the status quo where we can say, here's where things really didn't go so well.
Well, to borrow an expression of yours, we've kind of run the experiment. So let me ask it to you in a different way. Let's think about all the fears and apprehensions and, as you put it, risk tolerance that the regulators examining whether to make nicotine gum available over the counter were facing. Okay, let's just envision that for a second. What were they so afraid of? What were the terrible outcomes? What was the earth-shaking catastrophe that they were worried would happen if they unleashed the demon gum over the counter? And part two question: has any of that actually come to pass? Has anyone been injured? Has anyone been killed? Has anyone had their lives turned upside down and turned into a maniacal nicotine gum zombie? Has it caused people to commit crimes? Has it deteriorated people's lives? And oh, by the way, can we also put in the other tally the benefits that have arisen from it? But let's just look at the harms. What harms that they were worried about actually came to pass?
So what I will do, since this is history, and you may recall, like, we helped work on that conversion from prescription status to over-the-counter status, and supported GlaxoSmithKline in their work. There's a publication from 2008 where my colleagues Saul Shipman and Christine Sweeney did essentially a 10-year retrospective. What were the issues? What do we think have happened? So I will share that in the timestamps so people can.
Well, summarize it for me. Give me the big three worries.
Well, the concerns were that young people would be able to get access to this, and it would end up being a gateway onto more harmful stuff.
Did not happen. Did not happen. There was concern that people who smoke would use it to actually delay cessation. So the kind of concern about dual use, that people would only use it in times and places where they weren't allowed to smoke, and that would allow them to bridge and actually continue smoking longer than they otherwise might. There was concern that people would dual use it. That doesn't seem to have happened. And then there was concern that people would end up increasing their dependence on nicotine by getting it from multiple sources. And no, that doesn't seem to have happened either. The main problem with the products are that people have similar relative risk misperceptions that they now have plus with vaping. And whose fault is that?
Why, there's a lot of contributors to that concern,
including the agency.
Yes, but there has been some effort to improve the labeling, and the companies obviously had some incentive to try to address these barriers. So there was communication, education to physicians and pharmacists, but it's an uphill struggle since these beliefs are firmly grounded and grounded in people's minds and widely held. But half of people who smoke believe the way nicotine medications work is like disulfiram for alcohol abuse, that it makes you physically ill, that you throw up if you smoke while you're wearing a patch. 93% of people who smoke believe that if you smoke while you're wearing a nicotine patch, it increases your risk of heart attack. I mean, it's kind of crazy that people use these products at all.
It is crazy. It is a little crazy. Well, I mean, but Joe, I know listeners must get frustrated with my frustration.
Well, with you, they get frustrated with you.
Exactly. Their antipathy for me is palpable. But it frustrates me to no end that we can talk about these, these failures of the agency. I mean, none of the fears came true. None of their concerns were legit. None of them came to pass. Any ordinary American who's encountered these products could have told you that in 5 minutes. And yet here we are all these years later, after looking at that track record on this one product line. Okay, this isn't even the whole spectrum of what they regulate in nicotine. That this one product line, and you're the expert. You've studied this. You work for Glaxo. You've been looking at this issue for all these years, and it just absolutely flabbergasts me that after all this time, you're still saying, "Well, they're probably going to improve any day. They'll get it right one of these days. Let's just hang in there." I mean, how many receipts do I have to stack on the table in order to persuade you that these people don't know what they're doing? Or to put it as you did a moment ago, the perverse incentives that are imposed on them make it impossible for them to do it.
Well, and I'd like to think that the truth might lie somewhere in between there, because I don't think those perverse incentives are fixed. I think with the right political leadership and maneuvering room that the career staff at FDA, and this is relevant to regulation of tobacco products, not just with medicines, could be able and be trusted to make these decisions in a way that would greatly improve welfare.
So if only we could elect the right guy.
Well, I don't think it's the right guy or gal. I think notice the ray gun shirt for today.
Okay. All right. Nice. All right. Noted. Yeah. Well, if only Nikki Haley had been president then.
I think it's more broad. It's actually that's a piece of it. I think it's more broadly if civil society writ large would embrace the continuum of risk as the fundamental here, we would see rapid and positive changes. And I'm not giving up on accomplishing that, because I think that's where we have to get to.
Joe, there's a kind of viewpoint on the right that I subscribe to that holds that as liberals and lefties have abandoned the church and faith, that they have replaced their spiritual grounding with a kind of ersatz quasi-religious devotion to government. And when I hear you talk in this way, it's got so many components that just seem parallel to me to, my own experience in the church and what I know about, faith-based communities. Let's be forgiving of each other. Let's try to understand what's in the other person's heart. Oh, he's fundamentally a good person. Oh, I believe that someday we can return to Eden and things will actually be okay. If we can only get rid of that snake who's misleading us, we can all be brothers and sisters together back in the garden. And it comes across. I mean, I realize that a lot of people in your space share those sentiments, like a friend of the show, Cliff Douglas, for example. But I just, when I hear that, it's just, I'll put it this way. It is so far removed from what is actually happening. It's as though you're in some ethereal plane in an abstract world talking about your hopes and dreams. And meanwhile, the rest of us are down here in purgatory, living in the fallen world, the real world, in which people's lives are at stake. And Mitch Zeller's, latest musings result in a boot coming through our door. And I guess I don't know. I'm trying to put a question mark here, but I mean, do you ever think about that maybe your aspirations for that world and your idealism is prolonging the harm that we're enduring here on Earth?
Well, I'd I'd like to think I have sufficient humility to accept that I can't know that it isn't. And that it's a fair test. Because
it's kind of like it gets us back to sort of the, the question of when is the,
when have we waited long enough?
What was the cult that all wore the same sneakers and waited for the spaceship to arrive from behind the planet?
Oh yeah,
what was the name of those guys?
I don't. The Seekers. I think they're the Seekers.
Okay, yeah. The problem with all these millenarian cults is, at some point, doomsday's got to arrive, and for in our space, it's the eternal question is becoming how long must we sing this song? How long are we going to wait? You're showing us articles from the 90s in which these people were casting about like a drunken sailor on shore leave, and we just looked at one example of nicotine gum where they were 100% completely entirely wrong because they relied on their fanaticism and the perverse incentives.
There were concerns. They did approve it as an OTC. It's still 30 years later. It's still an OTC. Now, I can argue both sides of this, and you're more right than I will be comfortable conceding to you in this moment. Why don't we go on to my last thing, because we have other things we want to talk through.
This is a Fairchild piece.
This is a Fairchild piece. So this is still one of my favorite commentaries. It was on the eve of the first U.S. e-cigarette summit, and professors Fairchild and Bayer. At this point, we're at Columbia. I think Ron Bayer's still at Columbia, but they're really wrestling with these fundamental values-based decisions and uncertainty in the science, and what does this mean? And they really clarify, and maybe pull up the last one. That's the last one, where they basically conclude, and I'll just read this because it's so good. Policymakers are faced with a hard choice. They can follow the evidence that, while not without uncertainty, increasingly suggests that e-cigarettes can reduce the use of tobacco cigarettes, and then support the development of rationally regulated nicotine delivery devices like e-cigarettes. Following this path means tolerating some level of recreational nicotine use, just like clean needles required accepting that not everyone will stop injecting drugs. It also means accepting a role for the tobacco industry. The other option is to maintain a purist stance: no smoking, no drugs, no sex, no collaboration with the enemy, and therefore no smoking, and impose limitations that will all but assure that e-cigarettes and other non-combustible alternatives to smoking are driven from the open market. Rejecting e-cigarettes because the tobacco industry will profit from them has the virtue of being uncompromising, but it also means rejecting the evidence and accepting the predictable, deadly toll of cigarette smoking. That's a virtue we argue the world can no longer afford. And sadly, that could have been written this morning.
And I repeat, therefore.
And therefore, I must suck at my job.
That wasn't what I was driving at.
Well, that's what because the challenge is to get the people who reject that analysis to wrestle with it harder and hopefully come to a different conclusion.
Well, let me offer some praise, Joe. I don't know if it'll surprise you to hear this, but I do not think you suck at your job. I actually think, unlike a lot of your colleagues in the world of tobacco control, I actually have great admiration for what you do, because I regard you as a kind of safari guide that helps commercial enterprise navigate through this lethal, unforgiving jungle that should not be there, that ought to be flattened into a parking lot. And so I have nothing but praise for your guidance and your open-mindedness to other points of views. I think I wish that you could set a deadline for how long you'll hold on to your, how long you keep the devotional candle lit. But
well, in my faith tradition, we get 8 nights out of the sacred oil that was only supposed to burn for one. Like, I mean, there isn't a great alternative.
Yes, there is.
The civil disobedience, the dachshund knocking over the
we've talked about this, and again, we've run the experiment. It was the 10 years before FDA got the deeming rule.
Yeah.
And again, let's go back and talk about what are they so afraid of? How many people have died from vaping, Joe? 0. How many people have suffered lung injuries from vaping? 0. All of the great phantasms, the shadows on the wall of the cave that these people have been screaming about are not true. And during that period, products proliferated. Millions of people successfully quit smoking at a faster rate and a broader spectrum and more accessible than any other method to quit smoking ever devised. As our friend David Abrams points out, the single greatest breakthrough since the invention of the cigarette rolling machine in this field in the last 100 years. And so there is a better way. We lived through it. It's how I quit smoking. I smoked Marlboro cigarettes for 25 years, Joe. I tried to quit in numerous different ways. I'll give you you want to hear an actual knock on the nicotine gum? It sucks.
Well, we could do an episode. I could give you it's a fascinating history of its origin and its design intentions.
But the innovation in nicotine delivery is what helps people find products that work better for them.
That work better. Indeed.
And who's doing that innovation? AVM members and the nicotine industry. Who's trying to prevent those innovations? FDA, Mitch Zeller, and all of his colleagues. I mean, that's why I feel strongly about it. You want to talk about a Manichean, world? That's Godzilla coming out of the harbor there.
Let's keep wrestling. As I put in responding to some of Skip's thoughtful comments in the thread of let's get less wrong together.
All right. Well, maybe Chris, you can remove the slide. I mean, maybe that's a good place to pivot to what I've been calling tobacco control's fighting retreat. A big part of the reason I think why you see grudging admissions that vaping is the most effective way to quit smoking and that it's widely popular. When you see those points being articulated in national news outlets like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, AP, and even in a column that appeared in Bloomberg last week by the owner of that platform, Michael Bloomberg, in which, incredibly, in his piece, he acknowledged for the first time, vaping helps many people quit smoking. And I think the reason that that's happening, you would not have seen that. I know, because I looked at it with a magnifying glass for over the last many years. You would not have seen that, just a few years ago in any of those venues. And it's because I think of both ordinary vapors, the strength of ordinary Americans who are using these products to save their own lives, and the prevailing science, which is, again, a testament to you and your colleagues who are, trying to shoot straight. There's a huge part of that world that's not, but the ones that are, I think, are prevailing on the merits. And in a sense, Joe, it's kind of what you talk about a lot is once there's an acceptance of the continuum of risk or an acknowledgement that these products help people quit, that'll be a tipping point.
Those are not the same thing.
I realize that. Yes. I realize that. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's an important distinction that acknowledging that this seems to help, e-cigarettes seem to help some people stop smoking is still quite a ways from nicotine is delivered across a range of products that present a huge spectrum of risk, and that should be the basis for how they're regulated. Because that was not at all where
I agree. I agree with you that's a further step. But even the mainstream news outlets all acknowledge that vaping is far less harmful than smoking, which is a kind of facsimile of the continuum of risk. It's a colloquial way of expressing the continuum of risk. But I don't see the corresponding tipping point and shift over to the magnetic pole of THR that you hope for.
Correct.
Instead,
Correct.
what I see is I'm calling the fighting retreat, which is acknowledging this widely understood and irrefutable aspect, and then putting in a semicolon and just repeating the dogma of all the false claims. And so in that sense, it's a fighting retreat. In rhetoric, we would call this a Motte and Bailey argument, in which they make a broad, expansive claim, and then as it's refuted, they slowly retreat into the Bailey, which is the old-fashioned word for a fortress. And I mean, I can see why they're doing that, and it has to do, I think, with credibility from a communications perspective. They can no longer, pronounce that these products, the bunk claim that these products don't help people quit smoking, because it's so obviously, demonstrably, irrefutably untrue that if they were to continue to articulate that, the mask would completely drop and they would be fully regarded as fanatics. And so that's also why I think it's so crucial. I know we differ on this probably, but that's why I think it's so crucial to actively discredit these people. That's the lever. That's the leverage. You have to get in front of these news outlets, in their feeds, in front of their colleagues, and all their core readers who understand the issue. Grab them by the lapels and Belfast kiss right in the mouth and discredit them. There's no persuasion, Joe. These people are beyond persuasion. And so that's how I sort of regard the fighting retreat. I don't see it as a tipping point. I don't think that anyone at those news outlets or in the Bloomberg newsroom sees that sentence and concludes, gosh, are we the baddies? Instead, they're like, what can we do to shore up the fort? How can we acknowledge this and minimize it, marginalize it, and reinforce the walls? Am I mistaken in that?
No, I think that feels like a fair interpretation of what is going on. But I guess that's where my squishiness is, that I don't want to give up on persuasion. And I could make the argument, the fact that they're acknowledging this, that shows that they can respond and update, even if it is just a token and a chance to be able to say, oh, we've been fair and we, this. But what is our capacity to Belfast kiss like the establishment, like Bloomberg News or Michael Bloomberg?
Well,
it's not really a fair fight.
I mean, you're asking a great question, and I think I don't want you to give up on persuasion either. I mean, I'm a career-long public relations man. That's my entire métier. The real question is, which audiences are we trying to persuade? And I think the answer to that is millions of ordinary Americans, their representatives in government who have not yet been infected or bought out or bribed or co-opted by the forces of tobacco control, columnists and opinion makers, influential thought leaders. Those are the kinds of audiences that I think that we should be persuading with engagement. I mean, notice you well know, and Cliff Douglas does too. I don't agree with him on everything. There's a lot of aspects of his advocacy that I take issue with. And yet we've had him on the show and had a fair exchange of ideas, and I respect him immensely. And I applaud his work, even though I don't agree with all of it. And I would also hope to try to, give him a perspective that he might not otherwise hear from his colleagues in the conferences that he goes to. And if that helps him shine a light on aspects he hadn't thought of, all the better. And vice versa. I wish to learn myself. So those are spaces where persuasion, I think, can take place. Where we attempt to plow the sea, however, is in trying to persuade people like Marty McCary or Dick Durbin or Krishnamurthy or Meredith Berkman or Matt Myers or any of the people who are. We must recognize this. Let's look at it clinically here in the real world, like scientists, Joe, like credentialed thinkers. These people are fanatics. Their careers depend on that fanaticism. They've made a whole identity and a livelihood out of their antipathy for these products. Our Lord and Savior, could come back tomorrow puffing a jewel and it wouldn't change their minds. So I just think we need to look at it in those clinical terms and attempt to persuade, because again, what got the New York Times and Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg himself to grudgingly acknowledge people quit smoking with vaping? It was the fact that those other audiences have been persuaded, that there's now 20 plus a million Americans who know better, that there's now, all of the leading columnists and the science writers and Seth Manookin and John Tierney and Jacob Sullum and a long list of others and Cliff Douglas are now, saying that they can no longer maintain the fanatical facade. So that's what is going to get discrediting them is what's going to get them to change their attitude, I think. Or if not, guess what? Like our friends who believe in Satan's fireball, or our friends waiting for the spaceship to return from outer Mars, they can hold firm to those beliefs and put on their matching sneakers and drink their Kool-Aid in another room.
Well, it does give me a chance, and I'll put this link into it. I finished rereading David McRaney's book, How Minds Change. And you'll love it because it ends with him recounting a podcast he did with one of the leading adherents of the flat earth community. And he doesn't mention Satan's fireball, but he might as well have.
Yeah.
But I would encourage you to give it a read, because there's a lot in there about it's not like we should really keep trying, because I'm not prepared to assume and accept that. If I'm not afforded the opportunity to interact and speak with them, then that makes it much tougher. But I'm not as comfortable as you are.
If you don't have the opportunity to speak to tobacco control hardliners,
to persuade, it's difficult.
If you don't have the opportunity to speak to tobacco control hardliners or anti-vaping news media, what is tougher about that?
Well, it's very difficult to persuade someone if they won't interact with you or your ideas. I'm sorry to break it to me,
but it doesn't seem like you've made a lot of progress in that effort.
It's not a full shelf of trophies. That's fair, but I just think that will end up being the fastest and most sustainable way, and that's my optimism bias, I think, fundamentally.
So you think my approach of trying to persuade these audiences that are open to the idea?
No, I don't see them as mutually exclusive. I think it will help with those who have more hardened views if the much bigger group of people could be inspired to get curious and learn a little bit more and understand, why does England do it differently? Why is New Zealand having such success with these with the Maori populations? What goes into that? There's a lot that people could get curious about and end up feeling very differently about these topics.
We're bumping up against our time here.
I know.
I don't know. I wish I had my slide from the last SRNT journal with the paragraph of adjectives about how they regard your efforts. Just as a benchmark of how much closer to the light of reason, to the opening of the cave they're getting. The answer is not close at all.
No. Well, we could make a wager on whether those authors ever voluntarily retract that commentary. That's quite a target, isn't it?
Joe, the editors looked at at those adjectives, okay, and green-lit it. It's not just the authors. That wasn't an outlier. The publication thought very carefully about that before they printed it. I disagree with them. I think it's reprehensible. I don't let people talk about my friends that way. But it wasn't just some weirdo, it's the guy in a cubicle. It was there was all of them.
I did, but to close on that, I did get a chance to read a little more carefully that paper in the Journal of Business Ethics that looked at the graphic health warnings.
Your thoughts.
And this is an example where
let's remind readers, this is an article in the Journal of Business Ethics about whether the government ought to force vape manufacturers to put garish, photographic, lurid injuries on their product the same way that they appear on cigarettes, even though those maladies do not occur from nicotine vaping. And the authors of this piece in the Journal of Business Ethics said, yes, it's okay.
Well, what's clear is that the authors, the editors of the journal, the peer reviewers who looked at this were not familiar with this question and the opportunity of a continuum of risk. So it's almost stunning as an example of just that is not, talk about a blind spot. That is just not at all a consideration. And that it then explains it, but it tells us how far we have to go in terms of tethering the science to policy.
I beg to differ, Joe. They are the piece was not about whether to communicate on the continuum of risk. It was whether or not to show graphic injuries, photographs of graphic injuries on vape packaging. And they're well aware that those injuries do not occur from vaping. They know that's the whole reason it's a dilemma.
I think they are. I don't think they have the same tension that you are. They're not looking at this at all the same way. They don't cite a single paper that talks about relative risk.
Let me put a finer point on it.
Okay.
Let me put again. It's not about relative risk. It's about whether vaping causes those injuries. And
so
their argument is
it doesn't matter.
It scares people away from using the product. The truth of it is not relevant.
That is a fair criticism as well. Okay, well, on that happy note,
got that, everyone? The Journal of Business Ethics says lying's okay with one proviso, as long as it gets the other person to do what you want. In that case, go for it. That's good. We're accumulating knowledge, Joe, because that overthrows more than 2,500 years of Western morality. Honest to God, how low do they have to sink? How low?
Fair enough.
All right, Joe. Well, we'll return to the Garden of Eden next week, I hope.
Yes.
We'll get back to our regular schedule, and I thought you did a great job at quarterback and a lot to think about.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. This is it's always a learning experience for me, Jim. Thank you.
Well, you'll be pleased to know. I'll end on a light note, which is my beautiful 8-year-old daughter and I were recently at my beloved Coral Beach Tennis Club in Bermuda, and who was performing there in the pre-dinner evening, but the Yale Whiffenpoofs.
So that's why you played.
Well, I played it as an homage to your alma mater, of course, but
the Whiffs were there. Fantastic.
We actually saw them. We saw them live. This was a couple years ago, and my daughter, these guys all had like long hair, and they're singing in these loud voices, and they're wearing tuxedos. She thought this was, for her, this was like greater than seeing Bruce Springsteen in the front row. She was like, the heart eyeballs were popping out.
That's awesome.
And she refers that she couldn't pronounce Whiffenpoofs. She calls them the musical boys. So it's very.
That's beautiful. Well, and even that Jeff Brock, who I referred to at the beginning, who's the whatever, he was a Whiffenpoof. Tie it all together.
I mean, you probably got to push the ladies away when you're in the Whiffenpoofs. I can't imagine how many phone numbers those guys must have got. All right, Joe, this has been Jim McCarthy with American Vapor Manufacturers. For Joe Gitchell, thanks for joining us. We'll see you again, hopefully next week, friends.
Thank you.